in rural South Vietnam that America and her allies met their darkest hour. This tropical land of rice paddies, small villages, and peasant farmers soon turned into a living hell for the GIs as they tried to wage war against a dedicated and determined enemy. To combat America's superior firepower and complete control of the air, the Viet Cong adopted a brilliant strategy. At the heart of their resistance, a deadly spider's web of fiercely defended tunnels and subterranean bunkers under the rice fields and jungles of South Vietnam. The communist fighters literally lived, ate, and slept under the battlefield. They had hospitals, classrooms, and armament workshops. From these fortified nests, the guerrillas sprung their deadly ambushes. But a courageous few American and Australian foot soldiers, the Tunnel Rats, dared to staunch the enemy tide. It was their terrifying task to chase the enemy down into their booby-trapped retreat.
And you get down in a tunnel and they start closing in on you, or you hear noises and you start shooting, and you can get cranked up real easy and lose it completely, and probably make you go insane if you're not careful.
When you expanded your lungs, when you took a breath, you were kind of wedged in. Now, if you can picture yourself being stuck, if there was a cave-in or something, I can't imagine a worse way to die.
The Tunnel Rats would soon distinguish themselves for their uncommon valor and selfless commitment to duty.
You took pride in what you did. There wasn't very many of us. But if you did it well, you know you did something worthwhile. Because whatever you unearthed, whatever you uncovered, whether it be intelligence, maps, we get the edge on the enemy.
The most dangerous part would be psyching up to get into the tunnel. That was the part that was really the most frightening, because you didn't know what you were getting into.
When the U.S. and Allied troops first arrived in Vietnam in the early 1960s, they had no idea that the enemy were under their very feet. On the surface, the tunnel entrances were carefully camouflaged. VC guerrillas appeared and disappeared down them at will.
They were so well concealed. I mean, we probably walked over thousands of them, never knew it. Especially in the Cu Chi area. That's where the majority of all the tunnels were.
The small town of Cu Chi, just 50 miles north of Saigon, was at the heart of the Viet Cong's secret network. By 1965, the system snaked nearly 200 miles under villages, huts, and fields. It weaved from the Ho Chi Minh Trail in the north to the gates of Saigon in the south.
Under the battlefield was a system of tunnels connecting communities from village to village.
This was not the first time tunnels have been used in war. In fact, tunnels and underground fortifications had been used for thousands of years. Among the first troops with a specific mission to search and destroy the enemy's underground bunkers were British sappers in World War I, and most famously, the U.S. Marines in World War II. As early as 1943, the Japanese dug confounding subterranean defenses on the coral atolls of the Central Pacific. Penetrating the caves and hidden bunkers on the many islands like Saipan, Peleliu, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa became a challenging and dangerous task for these first U.S. troops to be called Tunnel Rats.
We developed, this took us some time and a little bit of blood, we developed techniques to deal with these things. Above all, this meant sealing entrances, sealing exits, going in with flamethrowers, frankly, entombing or killing the people inside. And you were able to do this.
In 1946 in Vietnam, the Viet Minh, as the resistance fighters were then called, began digging tunnels and underground bunkers to fight the French, who returned to Vietnam after World War II to reoccupy the former colony they called Indochina. In the spring of 1954, the Viet Minh defeated the French in the celebrated battle for Dien Bien Phu. It spelt the end for the French and their empirical aspirations. For the next 10 years, while the Army of South Vietnam, or ARVN, and the Saigon government were mired in corruption and coups, the communist guerrillas now called Viet Cong, or VC, took control of rural South Vietnam. When they arrived in 1965, the U.S. armies, including the 1st and 25th Divisions, stepped into a bear trap. The enemy, battle-hardened communist guerrillas.
The Americans thought they could win the war easily. But in reality, it wasn't that simple.
Thì biến cái đau thương đó thành cái sức mạnh căm thù để đánh lại Mỹ cao hơn.
When we lost in combat, we do not take it as a loss. It gave us other resolve and strength, which we would take into the next battle.
Là không có là ngược lại cái đó.
From the hidden underground bunkers and spider holes, the Viet Cong guerrillas sprung devastating ambushes and stealthy night attacks that inflicted horrific casualties on American forces.
You'd be walking through an area, and you really think there's going to be a bunker over here in this hedgerow, and there may be a sniper up in this tree and that kind of thing. But most of the danger came from walking through an area that was infested with these tunnels and what we call spider holes, just small, maybe this big around, holes that these guys could pop up out of, take a shot, hit a guy in the back, pop back down.
The young American and Allied soldiers on patrol in the thick jungle canopy of South Vietnam were left chasing shadows in an alien environment where violence and fear characterized their daily existence.
You dreaded being in a jungle where you can't see. It was scary. There were times there were some jungle parts where even at 12 o'clock noon you'd have to use a flashlight to see because it was that dark.
Everybody was the same. Everybody depended on each other. Sure, we got scared as hell sometimes, and sometimes you get so damn scared you couldn't move.
To survive the horror of combat, soldiers quickly learned to suppress their emotions.
On Operation Crimp, I think the first day there was 4 blokes killed, and I walked past their bodies and felt nothing, absolutely nothing.
The Viet Cong became brilliantly adept at making savage booby traps. Some devices were brutally simple. When a trooper stepped onto one of these man traps, the wooden spikes impaled and incapacitated him. The guerrillas became especially skilled at turning unexploded American ordnance into devastating booby traps.
Most of the time we found booby traps, it was because somebody triggered it.
Infantryman and soon-to-be tunnel rat Gary Schooler remembers vividly his first patrol in the Hobo Woods, just east of the Iron Triangle.
This is the first time I saw anybody killed, my first day out. And some guy sat down, we call them stick mines. It's a vertical bamboo stick. You can tilt it. You don't even have to step on it. You just tilt it and it goes off. And then this horrible screaming. It's a real high shriek. It's just ear piercing. And so you don't forget it. When you hear that sound, you don't forget it. You know there's a booby trap.
In October 1965, 68 Australian engineers, or sappers, from 3 Field Troop arrived in Vietnam primarily to help locate and disarm the booby traps. However, they soon made a critical discovery that changed the course of the war. 25-year-old Captain Alex Sandy McGregor led the way.
We came across this tunnel within a village, which was an enemy village. What happened was that I went down the tunnel, and I can remember my sergeant, my staff sergeant actually, holding my legs with a rope, because I went down head first.
This first tunnel turned out to be a relatively short escape tunnel from a village hut. It would, however, be dwarfed by an incredible discovery on their next mission. The Australians were about to find the enemy's massive secret tunnel labyrinth, but their success would come at a deadly price.
Many innovative weapons, including the Claymore mines, were introduced to combat during the Vietnam War. Among them were the F-4s, the AH-1G Huey Cobra, and the gunship. The tunnels of Vietnam will be right back.
On January 7th, 1966, American and Allied forces, under the direction of General William Westmoreland, launched a massive attack, spearheaded by the pride of America's military, the 1st Infantry Division. The strike was aimed at the heart of the Viet Cong war machine in South Vietnam. They moved into the Hobo Woods, just east of the Iron Triangle. Helicopters, tanks, armored personnel carriers, and more than 8,000 men joined the battle. In one huge blow, America's leaders planned to find and destroy the Viet Cong Politico headquarters and effectively end the war. The Australian engineers of 3 Field Troop were assigned to support the crack 173rd Airborne Brigade. They deployed from their base at Bien Hoa, just east of Saigon. The Australians headed for the south edge of the Hobo Woods. If all went according to plan, the enemy would be swept down towards them. Then the Australians would cut them off. But the plan backfired. The enemy was already waiting when they landed.
As soon as we landed, I knew there was something up. There were shots coming out, there were guns going off. We were being mortared at that time.
The thing that no training will ever prepare you for is the sound and the smell. The noise is indescribable. And of course the other thing is that time really elongates itself and then things become very, very vivid whilst you're in action.
In the midst of the chaos, an Australian infantryman spotted Viet Cong snipers firing from slits in what looked like an anthill. He crawled towards it and slung a grenade into the mound. He then called the engineers of 3 Field Troop. The Aussie sappers were ready. They had already devised a technique to deal with the tunnels. They first blew the top off to reveal an entrance, and then they used an industrial air blower called a Mighty Mite and blew smoke down the hole.
Then what we did was we blew down tear gas. The smoke was to find entrances. The tear gas was to clear the tunnel of enemy as far as we could. And then our boys wearing gas masks, torch in one hand, bayonet in the other, going down the tunnel.
The tunnel was empty. They then prepared explosives to destroy it. They skillfully placed the charges to make the maximum impact.
The charges that were used were all big. Military demolitions is like that. You make sure that the job's done properly the first time. So the charges were big.
Less than a mile away, another tunnel had been found. Aussie sapper Ray Forrester and his partner were sent to investigate.
I was scared the whole time. I won't even deny it. And inside it was an eerie silence. You could kind of hear yourself breathing. Yeah, it was just very eerie.
It was all slime and on the walls, whatever you touched was slimy, and it just felt like pigs to the slaughter, because you're just rolling around in the mud.
While simple tunnels and underground bunkers had been found before, the ones discovered during Operation Crimp were on a massive scale never seen before. They found whole guerrilla encampments underground, bunkers connected by tiny passageways. There were chambers that stored arms and food. They had sleeping quarters and areas to treat the wounded. The tunnel rats found hidden trap doors laced with booby traps that led to even deeper levels and more chambers. They had uncovered the Viet Cong's secret underground fortifications. When General Westmoreland was informed of the find, he ordered all tunnels be searched for men, intelligence, arms, and supplies. Then they were to be destroyed. The tunnel rats, driven by duty and courage, went to work. When they found trapdoors, they took even greater care in case it was armed with a booby trap.
You'd use your fingers, you virtually went down and kissed it. That's how close you got, just to make sure that you didn't miss anything. You can't miss anything, so you always just checked and double-checked.
On day 2 of Operation Crimp, on January 8, 1966, 3 Field Troop returned to the Hobo Woods.